Two bits of trendy advice that I absolutely cannot stand. Leslie Wells, connection coach. I help individuals heal, thrive, improve, repair, and connect more deeply in their romantic relationships by looking at things through an attachment lens. As someone who got my degree in psychology 20 plus years ago, immediately went into clinical counseling and private practice, and is now a coach and has been in this realm for a very long time, it drives me crazy to see people out there giving bad advice that is actually going to damage your relationship. So the first thing that drives me crazy when I see people say this or encourage this is to match energy. You should not match energy. That drives me insane. And here's why. If you're actually trying to lean into a relationship, if you are matching energy, then that is essentially a protest behavior. Something is not making you feel good. And so essentially you're matching their energy, and more than likely you're pushing them away. Your goal is to get them to lean in, to connect. So if you're pushing them away, you're literally moving away from your goal. I'm really big that when you show up in a relationship, you want to show up in a relationship that is real, which means you want to show up authentically and you want to show up with truth. And that means that when your needs are not getting met, or something is not working for you, or something is painful for you, that you speak to that thing directly. You clearly communicate it with specifics, and you directly express your needs and what it looks like for those needs to be met. So you actually give somebody a fair chance on showing up well for you, so you don't have to match energy. The other thing with that is that if you are matching energy, you are using protest behavior. You are not using clear communication. So the person never really knows what it is that you want or what it looks like to meet that need. If you are using clear, direct communication, and you're being specific and you're expressing your needs and you're honoring your needs by expressing them, the other thing that you need to make sure that you do is set boundaries. You don't just go do protest behaviors. Again, that's going to move your partner farther away. You want to actually set boundaries. So if you have someone who tends to lean to a more avoidant attachment style, and you match their energy by pulling away and giving them more space, guess what? It's going to backfire. They are going to feel relief in that space. They're going to feel like their needs are finally being honored. They're going to want to stay in that space, and they're not going to turn around and give you the thing that it is that you need. So the second thing that drives me crazy is this idea that if they wanted to, they would. That is absolutely untrue. We only show up in relationships based on our fears, when we feel safe, and avoiding discomfort for most of us who have insecure attachment styles. Now, securely attached people show up differently, but most people do not show up based on how they want to show up if they have insecure attachment. People will show up based on their fears and their wounds. So let me give you an example. For people who are dismissive avoidant, these people are triggered by conflict, vulnerability, and really being seen. They grow up with a defectiveness wound that comes from childhood. If you're unfamiliar with attachment, go back and look at some of my other videos. But think about this. If you were someone who does not know how to connect to your emotions, because as a child, you were emotionally neglected, then vulnerability, the emotions of others, are going to trigger you. In conflict, these individuals go into a trauma response of flight and freeze. So if you ask them, hey, what are you feeling right now? Can we fix this conflict? Can we talk about this feedback that I have for you? They are going to hear that as criticism, and they are going to go into a trauma response of flight or freeze. Literally, they can go into a place called alexithymia, where they cannot access their thoughts or their emotions or their feelings in that moment. It is not that they don't want to. I work with hundreds of DAs, dismissive avoidance, for those of you who are new here, and they want nothing more than to connect to their partner in those moments, to reassure them, to make them feel better, to understand what they're experiencing, to know how to lean in. They actually have a lot of self-loathing that goes on internally, that they can't show up better in those moments, because they do go into this freeze response where they cannot show up and make a move. They're essentially frozen and terrified. Their fear of vulnerability, of hearing that criticism, of your expectations, and their fear of being overwhelmed by your emotions, and that overwhelm keeps them from being able to move in and show up how they want to. Most of us tend to naturally want to move away from discomfort in our nervous system. So when you're in a relationship and someone triggers your nervous system based on your past wounds or your attachment wounds, then when you're triggered, you cannot show up how you want to. It is impossible until you get your nervous system calm and regulated. You can also take an example of an anxiously attached individual who, when their partner says, hey, I need some space or some independence, they start to spiral internally because they immediately see that disconnection as a threat to the relationship. So they might get clingier, they might send a bunch more texts, they might overstep your boundary for space. It is not because they don't want to give you what you want. They very much want to keep the relationship. they want to keep their partner, it's not that they don't want to show up differently. It's that their nervous system, their wounds, their fears, their traumas, their childhood blueprints get in the way. It is the responsibility of the person who is not able to show up how you want to meet your needs to actually do the work. The problem with that is even if they do that, it sometimes doesn't work. So you may have this idea in your head, well, you know what, they've gone to therapy and it's still not working. Talk therapy does not work for everyone, especially people who lean more avoidant. If they don't have the tools to sit in the discomfort and regulate their nervous system when difficult topics come up in therapy or coaching, then they are not necessarily going to be able to have the tools to sit in those things, to actually move through them and heal so they can show up in the relationship the way that you need them to. So even when they are doing the work, if they're not getting the proper work from the right people who know how to teach them these tools and help them through it gradually and slowly and gently, then they're still not going to be able to just show up miraculously how you need them to. So when people say if they wanted to, they would, that's a lie. And we know this from psychology. We know this from the nervous system. We know this from the internal thoughts of these people in this moment who very much want to. I work with people all the time who desperately want to show up better for their partners, but they do not know how, and understanding their partner and understanding themselves is not enough to make that happen. So before you hop on the bandwagon and feel really good because something confirms your right to get upset or get angry or point the finger back out at your partner, realize that it's not so simple, that people a lot of times are out there doing the best that they can and they're showing up with their own wounding and it's getting in the way of their connection with you.